Have you ever felt invisible at your own family's table? My name is Emily Carter, and for as long as I can remember, I've lived in the quiet spaces between conversations present, yet somehow always overlooked. If you glanced at our old family photos, you'd probably find me on the edge of the frame, a half smile, a hand holding a plate, a girl who never quite took up space. It's a strange kind of loneliness growing up surrounded by celebration, yet never quite the reason for anyone's pride. I used to watch my parents host grand parties in our Chicago home, their laughter echoing through halls, filled with friends, colleagues, and distant relatives. My father, William Carter, was the proud CEO of Carter Manufacturing, a company so old it felt like a family member itself. My mother, Linda, orchestrated every detail from the silverware to the guest list, with a grace I admired and feared. My role? Mostly to smile, stay out of the way, and watch my brother and cousins take center stage. I grew skilled at fading into the background. But there's something you should know about people who spend their lives on the sidelines. We become great observers. Every joke that landed, every toast, every unspoken slight, I noticed it all. I learned to find meaning in the smallest gestures, to understand people's dreams by what made them light up or dim. It wasn't bitterness that grew inside me, but a quiet resolve. One day, I promised myself I'd be seen not just by my family, but by the world. My story really begins the night of my parents' 40th anniversary party, a night that changed everything. The invitation never arrived for me. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Then a polite message from my mother explained so many VIPs, so little space, surely I'd understand. In that moment, old wounds resurfaced sharper than ever. It wasn't the first time I'd been left off the guest list, but somehow it hurt more when you're an adult and realize the pattern hasn't changed. Still, I didn't cry. I didn't plead. Instead, I looked out at the city lights from my apartment and thought of the company I'd built in silence, the innovations no one in my family ever asked about. I thought about the sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the failures and victories that had shaped me far from their gaze. The world knew me as E. Carter, tech visionary, an identity carefully kept from my parents, who still believed I was dabbling with computer stuff. If only they'd seen what I was building brick by digital brick. That night, I made a promise not of revenge, but of transformation. I decided I would no longer wait for an invitation to the table. I would build my own. Because sometimes the best response to rejection isn't anger or argument. It's quiet, unstoppable excellence, the kind that writes its own guest list in its own handwriting and invites the world to see what's possible when you stop seeking permission to shine. So if you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever been left out by the people you wanted to impress most, I hope my story gives you something more than closure. I hope it gives you courage, the kind that turns pain into power and silence into a standing ovation. Because sometimes the daughter they forgot is the one who changes everything. And sometimes being uninvited is the very beginning of being truly seen. Growing up in the Carter family, I was surrounded by tradition, a legacy passed down like an heirloom from one generation to the next. My father's world was built of factory floors and steel contracts, his pride measured in quarterly reports and holiday banquets. In his mind, there were only two kinds of success, the kind you could touch and the kind you could display in a press release. My fascination with technology, lines of code, and algorithms that danced in invisible ways seemed almost laughable to him. "Emily, one day you'll understand the value of real work," he'd say, glancing over the morning paper. I remember once at a Carter Manufacturing open house, I set up a simple computer demo in the corner. I was 15, and I'd just coded my first little game, nothing fancy, but it was mine. My father barely noticed, too busy giving tours and shaking hands. Later, as guests left, my cousin Mark joked that maybe one day I could fix the office printers. Even my mother, with her gentle smile, seemed to dismiss my project as a phase. "Let your brother handle the business talk, darling," she whispered, straightening my collar before the family photo. It hurt more than I let on. Sometimes the sharpest wounds aren't caused by words, but by what's left unsaid. The way people's eyes skip over you, the way your dreams are brushed aside as hobbies. I began to realize that in families like mine, certain paths were celebrated while others simply faded into the wallpaper. My friends at school didn't understand either. Their parents bragged about soccer trophies or perfect report cards. Mine wanted a future CEO, not a coder in sneakers and old band tees. But every time I felt out of place, I found comfort in the world I built for myself, a world of ideas, quiet discoveries, and endless possibility. While my family gathered for board meetings, I gathered online with other dreamers, teaching myself new skills, joining coding forums, building apps that no one in my life would ever use. I watched women like Susan Wojcicki and Reshma Saujani, leaders who turned rejection into opportunity. Their stories reminded me that different isn't broken. It's just the start of something new. Looking back, I see that families often confuse tradition with destiny. Just because something has always been done a certain way doesn't mean it's the only way. If my parents had looked closer, they would have seen the seeds of innovation quietly taking root. For anyone who's ever felt misunderstood for their passions, I hope you remember this. Your curiosity is a gift. What makes you different may one day be the very thing that saves the day. Little by little, I grew braver, asking questions, pushing boundaries, and sometimes standing alone in a room full of doubters. That's how the next chapter of my journey began, not with applause or validation, but with the quiet certainty that the only approval I truly needed was my own. And in that certainty, I found the courage to take my first real risk, one that would lead me down a path no one in my family could have predicted. Starting a journey on your own, especially when no one believes in you, is a leap into uncertainty. After college, I packed my tiny apartment with hope, determination, and more coffee than anyone should admit. My best friend Ava Kim shared my dream of building something meaningful. Together, we founded our first tech startup, convinced that passion and long hours could make up for inexperience. But the world, as it turned out, was not waiting for us with open arms. Investors were skeptical. Some meetings ended before they began. One VC even told us, "You girls have spark, but you need a man on your team to be taken seriously." Failure became a frequent companion. Our initial app crashed on launch day, turning excitement into panic. I remember the night our only server died, just as we were about to demo for a potential client. Ava and I sat in the dark, surrounded by cables and pizza boxes, laughing and crying in equal measure. Money grew tight. The dream job offers we'd declined seemed to haunt us. Friends from college posted about promotions, weddings, and new cars, while we scraped by on odd freelance gigs and faith. At times, it felt like our dreams were nothing more than stubbornness in disguise. Those years taught me something no business class ever could. The hardest part of building anything is believing in it when no one else does. The world loves to celebrate success, but rarely shows the thousands of small, quiet moments of nearly giving up. Ava and I watched competitors with more connections and shinier resumes race ahead. Each failure was a bruise to the ego and a test of commitment. It's easy to lose heart when you have nothing but each other and a blurry vision of what could be. But sometimes all you need is one reason not to quit. The turning point came on an ordinary Tuesday, though it didn't feel significant at the time. I noticed a recurring problem with inventory management at a local business. While everyone else dismissed it as an inconvenience, I saw an opportunity for innovation. Ava and I stayed up all night designing a simple AI tool to predict and automate stock orders. The results were immediate. The client raved and word spread. For the first time, our solution felt needed. That little win didn't erase the failures, but it did prove we were capable of real impact. There's a lesson hidden in every setback. Your struggles are shaping you in ways success never could. The late nights, the self-doubt, even the awkward silence of a failed pitch, they're teaching you resilience, creativity, and humility. If I could go back and comfort that younger version of myself, I'd tell her it's okay to stumble, to be scared, to question everything. What matters is that you keep moving forward step by step, learning as you go. Because the moment you decide not to give up is the moment everything can begin to change. And that's exactly what happened next. Our tiny startup, once overlooked and underestimated, was about to catch its first real break. But before we could seize it, we'd need to learn one more lesson about trust, teamwork, and the courage to dream bigger than we ever dared before. Every entrepreneur hopes for a breakthrough, but few expect it to arrive quietly in the middle of a busy week, disguised as another problem to solve. After months of setbacks and sleepless nights, Ava and I were almost too tired to notice the opportunity sitting right in front of us. Our inventory tool had caught the attention of a small chain of local grocery stores. The owner, Mrs. Garcia, invited us to her office, a cluttered back room stacked with paperwork and family photos. She spoke with warmth and a hint of exhaustion, telling us, "If you can save us time, you'll save my sanity." We worked side by side for days, tweaking the software, answering late-night calls, and fixing bugs as they appeared. Mrs. Garcia was patient with our learning curve and generous with her feedback. For the first time, someone outside our circle believed in what we were building. When our system finally streamlined her inventory and she called us lifesavers, it felt bigger than a business win. It was the validation we'd been quietly craving, a sign that our persistence was paying off and that our work truly mattered to someone. Word of mouth in a tight-knit community is more powerful than the most expensive marketing campaign. Soon other small businesses started calling. Our solution, designed out of desperation and hope, began to spread on its own. Ava and I spent long evenings mapping out new features, sometimes arguing, sometimes laughing, always learning to trust each other more. We realized that what had once felt like a disadvantage, being underestimated, working in obscurity, had given us the freedom to experiment without fear of failure. One real lesson from those early days: success rarely looks like you imagine it. It doesn't arrive on a red carpet or announce itself with applause. Most of the time, it's a quiet moment, someone saying, "Thank you, you helped me," or the first check that covers the rent. Our small wins built momentum, and our confidence grew. We stopped comparing ourselves to others and focused on serving the people who needed us. Sometimes patience and persistence are more important than raw talent or a perfect resume. Looking back, I can see how those little victories prepared us for bigger challenges. Each step forward taught us something new about technology, about people, and about ourselves. There's a quiet magic in discovering that your work can make a difference, even if only for a handful of people at first. That's how revolutions begin. Not with fireworks, but with a ripple of change spreading from one grateful heart to another. As our reputation grew, so did our ambitions. We started to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could take what we'd built and scale it into something much larger. But with each new possibility came fresh fears. Would the world beyond our neighborhood believe in us? Were we ready to compete with the giants? Or would our little company be swallowed whole? Those questions marked the next chapter, a leap from small-town problem solvers to dreamers with a national vision. And as we prepared to step onto that bigger stage, we carried with us every lesson earned in the shadows, ready to risk it all for the chance to truly be seen. Scaling a dream is both thrilling and terrifying. Ava and I knew our little software was helping businesses in our city, but could it survive beyond our familiar circle? We decided to keep my identity as CEO E. Carter, a secret not out of shame but as a quiet experiment. If our work was valuable, it should speak for itself. I wanted CleverSync, our company, to be judged on its merits, not on my last name or my family's history. That decision shielded me from bias, but it also created a curious distance between my public life and my family's world. As CleverSync's impact grew, we landed our first national client, a mid-sized logistics firm, struggling with outdated systems. I still remember the first conference call, my voice steady, but my hands trembling. Their team assumed they were dealing with seasoned executives. In reality, it was just two friends working from a rented co-working space, scrambling to keep up. When our solution boosted their efficiency by 30%, they sent flowers and a thank you note addressed to Mr. E. Carter. We laughed, but it stung a little. The world had no idea who was behind the screen. Keeping my CEO identity private also meant my parents remained blissfully unaware of CleverSync's rise. At family dinners, Dad still complained about the pace of modern business, certain that nothing could replace the Carter manufacturing legacy. Mom asked about my hobbies, never my company. I learned to accept these silences, tucking away my achievements like hidden treasures. Sometimes I wondered what it would feel like to share a win with them, to see their pride. But the fear of disappointment always lingered, a lesson for anyone. Sometimes protecting your dreams means keeping them quiet for a while. There's power in humility, and sometimes there's wisdom in anonymity. By staying behind the scenes, I gained insight into how clients and colleagues truly viewed our work, free from expectations tied to my name or gender. But there were drawbacks too. I couldn't celebrate openly or draw on my family's network. I had to rely on grit, patience, and a tiny, fiercely loyal team. Looking back, I see how this invisibility cloak allowed me to develop resilience and authenticity, qualities no shortcut or family connection could have given me. As CleverSync's reputation grew, so did the stakes. We received invitations to industry conferences, our user base doubled, and journalists started asking, "Who is E. Carter?" The mystery fueled curiosity, but it also created pressure. I knew that eventually I'd have to reveal myself not just to the world, but to the very people whose approval I'd once craved. Before I could do that, however, a storm was brewing much closer to home. My family's company, Carter Manufacturing, was struggling in ways none of them were ready to admit, and soon the fate of everything I'd built would be tangled with the legacy I'd spent a lifetime trying to escape. While CleverSync soared, the company that built my family's name was quietly falling behind. Carter Manufacturing, once the heartbeat of our community, was losing ground to competitors who embraced automation and innovation. My father, ever the traditionalist, clung to old ways. He dismissed digital transformation as a passing fad, believing relationships and reputation would keep the business safe. I watched from the sidelines, hearing stories from neighbors about layoffs and shrinking orders. It hurt to see something so familiar struggle. But it was even harder knowing I had solutions they wouldn't consider simply because I was the one offering them. At home, the cracks began to show. Family dinners grew tense with Dad's frustration, barely masked by forced optimism. He blamed ungrateful customers and disloyal employees, never the slow pace of change. My mother threw herself into planning ever grander company events, determined to project an image of strength. I offered gentle suggestions, consult a tech strategist, try a pilot project, but my words were brushed aside. "Leave the business talk to your father," Emily, Mom would say, pouring another glass of wine. It's a scene I know many have lived, watching someone you love resist the very change that could save them. Behind closed doors, Carter Manufacturing was in crisis mode. Loyal employees whispered about cutbacks. Board members argued about strategy. Old friends stopped calling. I heard rumors of missed payments and shrinking lines of credit. But my parents' pride wouldn't allow them to ask for help, least of all from me. It's a familiar trap for many family businesses in America, where the past can become both a comfort and a cage. I wondered how many others had seen their legacies crumble simply because letting go of tradition felt too much like admitting defeat. It was in these moments I realized how easy it is to mistake motion for progress. My parents filled their days with meetings, dinners, and endless talk of legacy. But without the willingness to adapt, tradition becomes a weight. The lesson came quietly. Loving someone means wanting better for them, even if it means challenging their beliefs. I wished I could bridge the gap between our worlds, one built on history, the other on hope. Yet all I could do was wait and watch, hoping the time for change hadn't passed forever. Soon the crisis would become too big to ignore. The company's struggles spilled into the public eye, rattling the community and sending shockwaves through our home. My father was forced to admit the truth. Carter Manufacturing needed a lifeline. That moment of reckoning brought pain and humility, but it also opened a door that had always been closed to me. For the first time, my experience was needed not just by strangers or clients, but by my own family. The next chapter would test everything I'd learned about forgiveness, courage, and the real meaning of legacy. When a crisis comes, it rarely knocks softly. One autumn morning, a headline appeared in the local paper: Carter Manufacturing facing financial uncertainty. My phone buzzed with worried messages from old classmates and neighbors. At home, the mood grew heavy. My father, usually so composed, seemed to age overnight. I saw him sitting at his desk late into the evening, shuffling reports and avoiding eye contact with everyone. For the first time, my mother's parties lost their sparkle. Even she could not ignore the rumors. There was no hiding from the truth anymore. The company was in trouble, and everyone could see it. The board called an emergency meeting. I wasn't invited. Yet news travels fast in a family, and Ava found the notice online, forwarding it to me with a simple note. "Maybe now's your time." I wrestled with my feelings. Part of me wanted to step in and save the company. Another part, still aching from years of dismissal, hesitated. Would they listen to me now? Did I want to risk my own heart and CleverSync on a rescue mission? These are the crossroads no one prepares you for, where loyalty, ambition, and old wounds collide. Real change often requires a dramatic reveal. That afternoon, I sent an anonymous proposal to Carter Manufacturing's board, a partnership with CleverSync that could modernize their entire operation. The numbers spoke for themselves: efficiency savings, a roadmap to recovery. My offer was met with confusion, then intrigue. The board debated for hours, weighing their options. My father paced the hallway, torn between pride and fear. Finally, they agreed to meet CleverSync's CEO, still unaware that I was the person behind the curtain. Sometimes the only way to be heard is to speak with results, not words. Walking into the Carter boardroom as E. Carter was surreal. Faces that had watched me grow up now studied me like a stranger. I presented our solution, clear, data-driven, full of hope, but also realism. When I revealed my identity, the shock was palpable. My father's eyes widened, my mother gasped. It was a painful, necessary truth. I explained that my vision had never been about leaving the family, but about building something new. That day I learned that courage is not just about facing down critics, but about showing up for people who once doubted you. We struck a deal. CleverSync would partner with Carter Manufacturing, with conditions to ensure transparency and innovation. For the first time, my ideas were not dismissed, but welcomed. That moment didn't erase the pain of old rejections, but it did prove that respect can be earned even if it takes a lifetime. As we began the work of rebuilding, I realized the next challenge would be even greater, not just saving a company, but healing a family. And as the doors to the boardroom closed behind me, I felt hope flicker, a belief that maybe, just maybe, the future could be different from the past. Change never comes without resistance. In the first weeks of CleverSync's partnership with Carter Manufacturing, excitement mingled with anxiety. Some longtime employees welcomed the new tools and training, eager to adapt. Others, especially those loyal to my father's way of doing things, eyed every change with suspicion. At team meetings, I listened to their concerns and tried to understand their hesitation. It wasn't just about learning new software. It was about letting go of a comfort zone, about feeling safe in a world that suddenly demanded something different. I realized that for many, change feels less like progress and more like loss. One afternoon, a veteran floor manager named Mr. Green pulled me aside. "We've done it this way for 30 years, Emily. It's not easy to trust a new system, even if the numbers look good." His words reminded me of all the times I too had been afraid to step into the unknown. So instead of lecturing, I invited Mr. Green and his team to help test our systems firsthand. We ran small pilots, listened to feedback, and made improvements together. When mistakes happened, we owned them and kept going. Over time, skepticism softened into curiosity, and then slowly into belief. What struck me most was how everyone's willingness to try, however shaky at first, created unexpected leaders. Younger employees who had once felt invisible flourished as they trained others and shared their knowledge. Ava led workshops, turning complicated tech talk into plain English. I saw new friendships form across generational lines, built on shared triumphs and shared frustrations. The process wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Progress, I learned, is rarely a straight line. It's more often a winding path with setbacks that test your patience and small wins that renew your hope. I think about the mistakes we made, the software bugs, the miscommunications, the days when nothing seemed to work. There were moments of doubt, team members threatening to quit, my own confidence shaken. But those were also the days when the true lesson emerged. Lasting change is less about convincing others and more about walking beside them patiently and respectfully. Real transformation honors both the past and the future, finding ways to bridge what was with what could be. It isn't easy, but it's worth it. With each hurdle overcome, Carter Manufacturing regained not just market share, but a renewed sense of purpose. Employees felt seen and heard. My parents, too, slowly let go of old fears and began to see the value in something they hadn't understood before. Through collaboration, forgiveness, and a little humility on all sides, a new kind of legacy was taking shape, one that embraced tradition without being trapped by it. The next challenge I knew would be facing the world outside, where both reputations and relationships would be put to the ultimate test. And this time, I felt ready. Word of the turnaround at Carter Manufacturing began to spread, drawing attention far beyond our small city. Industry publications ran headlines about our unlikely recovery, framing it as a classic story of old meeting new. Some praised our courage, while others questioned if the changes could last. Invitations arrived for speaking events, interviews, and even a feature in a national business magazine. For the first time, I felt the world looking not just at CleverSync, but at my family's company with curiosity, admiration, and a fair bit of skepticism. Success in the spotlight felt different from the quiet victories we'd celebrated in private. At home, my parents struggled with their new roles. Dad handed over more decisions than ever before, sometimes grumbling, sometimes relieved. Mom hesitated, still clinging to her traditions, but started asking more questions about the company's future. One evening, she confided in me I never thought change would come from our own daughter. There was a softness in her voice I hadn't heard in years. These conversations, though sometimes awkward, became a new bridge between us, a place to share fears, ideas, and the pride we'd both learned to keep hidden for so long. Of course, there were setbacks. Not every project succeeded. A new product launch fell flat, and a technical glitch nearly derailed a major contract. There were days when the pressure felt suffocating, when I wondered if our progress was just luck. But I drew strength from the team around me, Ava, the employees who had become friends, even my parents who offered support in their own imperfect ways. I realized that resilience isn't about avoiding mistakes. It's about trusting yourself to keep going, to adapt, and to forgive yourself when things fall short. For anyone walking a similar path, here's what I learned. You don't have to choose between your family's story and your own. It's possible to honor where you come from and still create something new. Real leadership isn't about always knowing the right answer. It's about listening, learning, and lifting others up when you can. Sometimes the people who doubted you most will become your greatest allies. And sometimes you'll find that the walls keeping you out were built as much by your own fears as by anyone else's expectations. As Carter Manufacturing moved toward its strongest year in decades, the air around our dinner table felt lighter. We laughed more, argued less, and learned to trust each other in ways we never had before. But I knew the journey wasn't over. The final test would be letting go of old hurts and truly celebrating what we'd built together. With the national conference approaching and the whole industry watching, I realized the real challenge wasn't just winning in the marketplace. It was daring to show up fully and authentically for my family and for myself. Standing on the stage at the National Business Conference, I looked out at a sea of faces, some familiar, some entirely new. It struck me how far we'd come. This story began in the shadows, shaped by rejection and quiet ambition, built through late nights, heartbreaks, and small but meaningful victories. Along the way, I learned that being overlooked isn't a curse. It's an invitation to notice yourself, to recognize your own gifts, and to chart a path that no one else can see. The road was never straight, but every detour taught me something invaluable. I spoke about the transformation at Carter Manufacturing, how old traditions and new ideas can coexist if we're willing to listen and grow. I shared how collaboration with my parents and the team people I once feared would never accept me became the foundation for something stronger than any single legacy. Real change didn't come overnight or without setbacks, but through courage, empathy, and a willingness to forgive both others and myself. I watched pride flicker in my parents' eyes, a feeling sweeter than any headline or award. If there's one lesson I hope you carry from my story, it's this. You don't need anyone's invitation to build your own future. The moments when you feel most invisible may be the very ones preparing you for greatness. Trust your resilience, nurture your curiosity, and surround yourself with people who see the real you. Mistakes and disappointments will happen, but they don't define you. What matters is how you rise after each fall, and how bravely you choose to begin again. As the applause faded and the lights dimmed, I realized our journey was still unfolding. My family and I were no longer held back by old fears or narrow expectations. We had learned to celebrate differences, to value the gifts each of us brought to the table, and to build a legacy rooted not in pride, but in hope and kindness. For everyone listening, remember, your story is still being written, and it holds the power to change more than just your own life. It can inspire others to dream bigger too. If my story moved you or sparked something inside your heart, I invite you to join this journey. Subscribe, like, and share your own experiences in the comments below. Tell me, have you ever felt left out or struggled to find your place in your family or career? Let's build a community where every voice matters and no one has to wait for permission to shine. Because together, we're not just rewriting old stories, we're creating a future where everyone belongs.